Society?
Strangers. Strangers in society.
Strangers on the internet?
The secret.
Strangers?
Society, oh, welcome, stranger.
Secret for society? Strangers.
Society.
Welcome to the secret society.
Strangers?
Welcome back to the Secret Society of Strangers podcast. We have another guest episode. I'm here with Josh and Jamie as always.
Hello.
What up?
Our guest today is Kevin.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, man?
Doing well tonight, thank you.
Yep. So you have quite an interesting story. You want to just start and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can get into your story?
Sure. We can get right into it. So I guess a little bit about my background first, because it's, that kind of leads into this program or phenomena, whatever you want to refer to it as. Let's see. Raised Christian. So religion has a lot to do with this. Raised very conservative Christian, Baptist to be exact. Went to Liberty University, which is in Lynchburg, Virginia, Jerry Falwell School. Struggled throughout my entire life with drugs and alcohol. And I had a very solid relapse pattern. I would do very well. And when I did well, I would do really well, excel. And then, either through fear of success or fear of failure, one or the other, I would always find a way to sabotage it. I'd start drinking again, or I'd think I can handle both. I can have my cake and eat it too. And I'd start drinking and using again. And that kind of continued all the way until about 2011. And then I got sober again, and I stayed sober for quite some time. And then I started doing work for a guy in New Jersey who was a pagan. And turns out he was a methamphetamine dealer. And this was the first time in my life that I was introduced to methamphetamine. And it's important to bring up the methamphetamine use because that is a common denominator amongst people that hear voices. There is something very particular about that drug. Whatever it does to the brain, the release of dopamine and serotonin, the uprise of adrenaline and cortisol, releasing fear, whatever that chemical imbalance that's created in the brain. You see it a lot with schizophrenic patients and DIDs, dissociative identity disorders, and also with people that identify as targeted individuals. There is a common denominator of methamphetamine use. So I never experienced hearing voices for like the first, I want to say, year or two. And then, I started noticing a bit of a pattern, right? So I got to a point where, because I kind of maintained my meth use for the first year. Right. I would go to bed normally. I would sleep fine. I'd get up. I'd go to work. I would do a little bit throughout the day, and I maintained. And then I remember one night, I said, well, I wonder if sleep's optional. So I stayed up. And then that turned into like a weekly kind of thing where I just wouldn't go to sleep. Mm-hmm. Then I started to kind of notice a pattern right around like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Usually when you're dipping down in the REM cycles. And I'd start getting very paranoid, and I'd start feeling as if I was being observed. And then the weird behavior begins, because now you feel like people are watching, you feel like your neighbors are watching you. So I start putting cardboard up on the windows because there's this overwhelming feeling that you're being watched. Okay. Up until this point, I was doing fine. So then I would get some sleep and it would kind of go away. All right. So kind of fast forward a little bit. The methamphetamine use increased, and then it kind of became like a cycle throughout the next almost decade with the meth use. And then as the meth use continued, my life regressed. You start separating yourself from family and friends and, your bonds and your connections, and you lose interest in work. You're kind of like, you get stuck in this pattern of trying to fulfill 20 abstract tasks in a minute's time just to feel good, because there's this constant need of repetitions. You just want to, you want to fulfill something that, and you're never fulfilled. You're never fulfilled. Yeah. So, and it was towards the end of this that the voices. So when I first started hearing voices, they just narrated. almost like how you would associate like two men sitting on a front porch that just kind of sit there and mumble about the stuff going on in the street all day. Like, yeah, what's that boy doing riding by on his bike again? He's dumber than a box of rocks. Just it wasn't very, it was just a narration. Almost like you're reading a third party kind of a short story or something. Right. So you don't really respond to it. But yet they're communicating, or they're not communicating, they are talking directly about your life in that present moment. So you find yourself in this weird thing where you're kind of like doing stuff just to throw them off, like to see if they're real or not, because the brain gets very confused and you don't know if it's meth-induced psychosis, which is a common thing, or if it's the onset of schizophrenia. So I would sleep, I'd wake up, the voices would be gone. All right, so let's now, so I'd say probably starting about 3 years ago. All right, so up until that point, the voices were always the same volume. I would always sense them in the same place, and they always narrated, and the voices were always people that were in my short-term memory, friends, family, relatives, whoever. I always knew the voice. I identified with it. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is when things got weird. So now the voices became two males and a female that I had never heard before. All right, and this happened to me, oh man, somewhere around, I was on a road trip a while ago, and somewhere around, I want to say Idaho. So I took a road trip from Philadelphia out to Seattle, and then from Seattle down through Portland into San Francisco, and then back across again. And I spent a lot of time in Colorado, and then came back to Philadelphia. And, it was with me the entire time. And they kind of transformed from narrating into talking about things that were not only in my immediate present moment, but also forecasting things like premonition, and then also being little tricksters, So they kind of suck you in with this premonition thing, where it's like they know what's happening next, and then these weird synchronicities would start happening. So you're thinking that you're in touch with some sort of a higher being here, and then at the same time you're fighting with yourself, because I was still on methamphetamine. So keep moving forward here. We found out that my girlfriend was pregnant. So my girlfriend was with me the entire time, and this is kind of an important thing to also put in there, is that I was hearing the voices, and because I was able to hear the voices, I was able to at least have a decision within myself whether or not I chose to respond to them. So if the voices were saying something crazy, like there's a child in that building in the basement that you need to go save, because they'll say stuff like that. It's not stuff, and that it's not of you, because there's this very weird high-pitched frequency that's associated with it. I don't know if you've heard about this is a common thing with people that identify as targeted individuals. It's not tinnitus, because it almost sounds like a tuning fork, or like glass scraping on glass. And it's very high pitched, and it penetrates your brain, and it almost feels as if it's expanding your head. And sometimes I would drive so fast, and then it would go away, and then I'd stop, and then it would catch up, and I just kept trying to drive faster to get away from it. So, but back to what I was saying, because I was able to hear the voices, it at least gave me the ability to respond to them or not. I could say, well, that's bullshit, I'm not responding to that. Now, my girlfriend was hearing it, and she was not hearing it, so she was just understanding it. So there is a level of this where the voices are being spoken to you, but you don't hear it. So when you don't actually hear the voices, it comes across as a notion of your own making, and you have very little choice to respond to it, because you think that these ideologies and these theories are of your own. So, and it was scary. It was very, very, very scary. It was scary, and yet at the same time, so bizarre. I mean, she would get a notion that there was a car in a parking lot that was hers to take, and she'd go to the parking lot, and there'd be a car there, sitting there with the keys in it. So she hops in the car, and she takes off from oh, where were we at? She takes off from Colorado into Wyoming near Cheyenne, and led the police on a slow speed O.J. Simpson style chase, where they had to throw the spike strips out to stop the car. So then she insisted that the police were all pedophiles, because this is what's, and it's, and knowing what I know now, at the time, before I really gotten deep into this and trying and have a better understanding, before I, at the time, I was just like, what is wrong with you? Like, how could you, like, and I mean, obviously my empathy and sympathy and compassion is through the roof for that sort of, behavior now. And it's almost as if the authority figures themselves are under this kind of control, because there was no arrest, there was no criminal report, there was nothing. They took her to the hospital and said, it's okay. Just gave the car back. We still don't know whose car it was. And this is just one of like a series of, and this is a very common thing that happens with targeted individuals. They're told to go on these weird adventures and journeys, and they'll go through with it. And then these weird synchronicities happen where people are just standing there waiting for them with keys to a vehicle and say, go ahead, we know it's you. And it's, and then other times it goes terribly wrong, like terribly, terribly wrong. So, so when weird stuff like that happens, it's, that it's not of your own making. It's that it's not of your own mind, and that you're dealing with, I refer to them as entities, because the truth is, I don't know. If I knew, if I knew, I don't know. And a part of me feels like that's a part of it, because, when if you have it in your head that 100% who it is, well, then your perception towards them, your character development revolves around your perception towards them, if that makes sense. So if you knew for 100% that it was the government, well, immediately hatred and anger consumes you, immediately. But when you think that it's an extraterrestrial entity or an interdimensional entity or something like that, well, then there's a problem with that too, because now you're dealing with telepathy and mind reading, and you have this almost like this feeling that you're not good enough, and then you're stuck in this cycle of shame and guilt, and but we can get into all that sooner. But yeah, so the experience itself will directly revolve around your perception or your belief on who's doing this to you. So I believe that there's a lot of confusion and chaos with that intentionally. Like, you're not meant, you're really not meant to know exactly who is behind this, and, so that you can further work on yourself. All right. So once we found out that she was pregnant, and we were in Colorado at this time, and now at this time I was losing my mind, because I couldn't figure out how these voices knew, everything that was going on. You immediately think there's cameras in the car. Obviously, you think that there's speakers in the car. I'm ripping the car apart. I can't tell you how many windshields we went through, because I ripped the rear view mirror off, thinking there was a camera in there, just losing my mind. So finally, we make our way back to Philadelphia. And I said, I have to get sober. Like, I can't do this anymore. So I put myself into a rehab called Self-Help last July. It's been almost a year now. And my first night in the rehab, now I had already detoxed at this time at Jefferson Hospital in Center City. The drugs were out of me. I was still hearing the voices, and then it got quiet. And then one of the voices said, "Are you ready?" And I remember just being silent. And my entire my room in the rehab turned into a planetarium. Absolutely insane. Stars, planets, with all sorts of faces, human faces, alien faces, mountain ranges, tree lines, landscape.
Looking at it, was it, because we had another guest kind of explain something where their room had like an overlay. So
yes,
they could kind of see what was behind it, but in front
it's
of
an overlay. Yeah. So whether my eyes were open or my eyes were shut, it's the same as if you were doing acid, right? So it's not really what's going on in your environment. It's just what's happening in your mind. So the whole event's in your mind, everything. So, but yet at the same time, it would fan out. So it would fan and plane out to take up the entire ceiling of the room, and then it would go thin and then fan down this way, which was very bizarre. And then finally what it did is it fanned out completely so that my entire room was nothing but stars, and then almost like a scene out of Star Wars or Star Trek, like hyperdriving through it, going all the way through it. And that was that moment. And I remember being up all night, and that was the beginning of the what I like to refer to as exposure therapy, or almost like a fear exposure therapy or trauma-based therapy is the best way to refer to this as. So I stayed in the rehab, and then, now mind you, I did not withdraw, no withdrawal whatsoever, and since then, not one single craving. I mean, unbelievable. It sucked it out of me. Yeah, well, there was some sort of intervention. So, yeah. So, all right. So I got out of the rehab, and at the time we were staying at an extended stay in Horsham, and that's when it really started getting bad. And there was times where I just wanted to run to the hospital and get on some sort of medication, because because when you have something like that's that invasive and in your head, and you can't get out of it, you cannot get rid of it. I used to have lucid dreams where I was stuck in like jelly and honey, and I couldn't get out, or that there was two sort of like nefarious characters with almost like hangers, and one would pull my neck this way and the other one would pull my neck the other way, just going back and forth. And it's that terror of the mind, and really what that was preparation for what else was to come. So just a little bit of like a little tidbit of like for me, and again, I can only speak for me because I speak to a lot of people that their experience is much different. I don't know if they had, or whoever's behind this, like if they had some sort of compassion on my daughter, or I don't know.
Well, how old is your daughter now?
Well, now she's 4 months. Yeah.
Okay. That you were put through this, that you be prepared to be a father.
Absolutely.
You know that at your heart level.
Right. Yeah. So, which is why so much of it had to happen so quickly, because I only had, at that point, I only had 7 months to prepare for her birth.
Exactly.
So a lot of people, this will take a decade.
Yeah.
And I had to get, crash course. Yeah. So, all right. So, real quick, like a little bit of the psychological stuff that would happen. All right. So I would go through maybe like 2 or 3 days at a time where it would just be extreme ego feeding statements, because you're having this, extraordinary event that's occurring to you, to you. So by all rights, you have this belief that it calls for an extraordinary outcome, right? So you don't know, am I being called to be an actor, a movie star, or like some sort of, like, your mind, your judgment's gone. So I'd go through like several days, sometimes a week, of just extreme ego feeding statements. You're the best guy we've ever met. All of us are here, are so proud of you. Like, I mean, just crazy stuff. And then you're getting visuals of like people that are like applauding you and you feel great. And then all of a sudden it would stop and they'd be like, how effing stupid are you? You gotta be kidding. Are you an idiot? And that would go. And the first time that happened, and then you get the high pitched ringing that's associated with it, and you just feel dumb, and your gullibility turns into anger. And I smashed my head through the wall one night. And because it was so intense, it's almost like that there's an evoked sense of anger that's placed on the occurrence, just for you to really learn how to get over it. I'm always trying to see the positive aspect of it. I have to, because I had a daughter coming. So that, for me, I always had to push to see the positive in all of it. Always. Some people they refuse to. I wasn't in that situation. So for me, I was almost involuntarily, because of my daughter on the way, forced to see, okay, what's the game plan behind this? What are they trying to show me? So I remember the last time that happened, like very, to an extreme extent like that. They were, again, extreme ego feeding statements for a few days, and then they stopped, and they were like, you are ugly mother. Like, I mean, they get nasty. You were an ugly mother, right? And I just laid there with it. And in my head, I literally felt like a pop, like a ping in the top of my head, like my crown. And it sounded like the over tightening of like a high E string on a guitar when you pop it, and it went pop, and I just laid there and let it resonate, and I felt a cold wash just come down and flow through me, through my entire body. And I remember at that moment, like, realizing I don't have to respond to this bullshit. You know? Like, that's you know, I don't have to respond to this. Like, I don't need to respond to it. And then you have to start getting very realistic with yourself. You know, you have to start, you know, telling yourself that at first I almost had to put myself down. Like, you're not special. You're not unique. You really have to come up with mantras to go against they call it V2K, voice to God. Yeah. So, and then, so here's another aspect about this that's very important to touch base on. And this is kind of one of the differentiating factors between people that experience schizophrenia and people that identify as targeted individuals. The manner in which you hear the voices. All right, so I don't hear the voices in my head. I hear the voices in the whirring of the bathroom exhaust fan, in running water. I hear it in the refrigerator. I hear it in the cars that roll down the street. The wind, any sort of ambient noise is where the voices is where you'll hear them. Okay, and you know, not to like jump too far ahead of myself, because the relationship that I have with these voices now is much different from back then. It's actually gotten to a point where it's like you know, therapeutic. And when something is important for me to know, then they'll let me know. So one of the key words that they gave me was onomatopoeia. All right. So, all right. And this is a word I haven't heard since like 6th grade. Right. So I actually had to go and look it back up again. What the heck's an onomatopoeia? So, you know, an onomatopoeia is a sound that takes word form. So like oink, pow, bang. And this is their manner of operation. Right. So, and this is, in my belief, one of the direct causes of gang stalking. Right, and this is another phenomenon with targeted individuals, is that because of the manner in which they hear the voices outside of their own heads and the manner in which the voices speak to them, they believe that it's their neighbors. And it's a shame that the neighbors get the brunt of a lot of their, I can't even say hallucinations because it's not their fault. But they don't understand that the brain is the processing center for everything. You know, it's the processing center for our hearing, for our sight, for our touch, for our everything. So what's happening is that ambient noise is being processed in the brain, and our brain just filters out ambient noise. You know, and I've read a couple different articles, and some articles say that ambient noise is filtered out in the prefrontal cortex, and some say that it's still part of the auditory cortex. But we don't pay attention to ambient noise because these are safe sounds. Right? When the wind is blowing, I don't really pay attention to it. I just know that that's part of my environment, and I've been experiencing it my entire life. But when the voices are happening directly in your head, they commingle with the ambient noise, giving it the appearance that it's happening outside of the individual, but it's not. But people don't understand the difference, and they think that it's happening across the street. They think people are driving by in their car yelling at them, and it's not. It's just, these are normal everyday sounds that you hear that are, you know, intertwining with the sounds that are being processed in your brain, giving it the illusion that it's happening outside of the individual when it's not. And this was something that I had to get past, you know, because you live your entire life, you know, 4 decades just filtering out ambient noise. And then all of a sudden I'm hearing voices all around me, and I can't figure out, you know, why. There's nobody ever there. It's never my neighbors. It's never my mother or father. It's never my friends. It's never somebody in a car. It's never. So, you know, this creates a condition known as like apophenia, which is where a person would begin to put together pieces of a puzzle that don't exist. They just don't exist because they don't understand exactly what's happening in the brain. So once I was able to kind of like figure that out, and that was only because they helped me with that, you know. They helped me be able to understand exactly what was going on inside of my head, you know, because maybe they knew that like I I wouldn't figure it out, so I kind of had to do like a little bit of, background search on that. So all right, can I keep moving forward a little bit? So as time kind of went on, what's that?
I said you're doing perfect.
Oh, yeah. I mean, stop me if I'm just kind of rambling on here, or if this is like...
Oh, no, you're...
We don't want to interrupt. Yeah.
No, and you're filling in. I'm looking at my questions as you're hitting them, so you're good.
Okay. All right. But one of the more difficult times that I have is trying to change the perception of other individuals, that are dealing with this, because it is most definitely a staged process. It's a phased process, and most people get stuck in a phase. They get stuck in this, they think it's the government phase. And I can't entirely sit here and say that it's not, because there's a solid argument for both, and I think when this first started for me, the government, or a lot of people think it's just an authority figure, or it's town, like a lot of people think it's Community Watch, or a lot of people think it's religious organizations that are doing this, but you really have to think about the concept behind this, that there's religious organizations that are driving around in cars with V2K microphones that are blasting thoughts into your head. I mean, yeah, it does sound crazy, but at the same time, this is real technology that is getting ready to come out. All right. So there is... so when this first started happening, I immediately went online to try to figure out what it is that was causing the voices to come into my head. And one of the first things that you come across is patents for this type of technology. We actually have the technology now to not only read people's thoughts, but to transmit thoughts into other people's heads. This is proven. There's patents on this. There's universities in Austin, Texas. I believe it's actually Austin, Texas University. That is, I think they're like on the forefront of what's actually being told to the public anyway, of having a headset that goes on and you think and your thoughts come up on the screen.
Yeah.
Right. So,
I've seen a couple of articles about that.
So people see this stuff, and that's their proof. That is their proof that, these technologies exist. And then I almost had to get to a point with all this where, I didn't want to, I don't believe I'm that special. My governor of Pennsylvania doesn't know me. My mayor of my town of Phoenixville doesn't know me. The librarian doesn't even know me. My neighbor next door.
The Phoenixville mayor probably knows you.
Yeah, my neighbor doesn't even, it's like, I'm just unknown. Who the heck am I that some top level black budget program is going to take the time not only to, for me, it was beyond experimentation. This was a very well thought out plan of rehabilitation. And, I believe that, it's been there for far longer than I noticed it, because once you really start getting into it, you start seeing patterns in your own life, with moments where I was talking to myself, or I was having dreams that are coinciding with dreams that I have now that, kind of go hand in hand with what I'm experiencing. And then you start having the realization, like, this has been going on probably my entire life. And they just, maybe because Arrested Development had occurred, they decided to break through that unconscious veil and make themselves known. So one of my biggest arguments to people is the case of James Tilly Matthews. If you ever get a chance, look up James Tilly Matthews. He was a British merchant, and he's actually the first documented case of schizophrenia. He passed away in the early 1800s. But before the technology even existed, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia because he thought the British Parliament actually had a device that he referred to as an heirloom. And he actually drew pictures of this heirloom. And it was a machine that the government was using to transmit thoughts into his head. Right. So he's a modern day targeted individual. He is, by all rights, if you read that story about him, you would say that's a targeted individual. But yet it occurred before the technology even existed. And then as Carl Jung started doing a lot of research into schizophrenia, a lot of the same story. They all believe that there is some sort of advanced technology that is being used to transmit thoughts into their head. So then you start to wonder, like, well, why is everybody thinking this? Like, where does this concept come from such a unanimous group, or from such a populated group of people that way before this technology even existed, they had the same exact thoughts that we have now. And the only difference really is that we have the internet in this day and age, and I can go online and I can see that these technologies are actually coming into fruition, and that is credibility to think that the government is after you. Now, that's not to say that certain programs like MK Ultra did not exist, because they most certainly did, and that's not to say that Project Gateway did not exist, because it most certainly did. And that the government hasn't been experimenting with the consciousness of human beings for quite some time now. But in my experience, that's not what this has been. And I really had to get over that hurdle. And once I was able to get over that hurdle, well, then the experience became open for whatever it was that I believed it was. And that's the fascinating part about this. So it was almost as if whatever reality that I was creating in my unconscious arena, that was the reality that would manifest, because the associated fear or the associated emotion was attached to it. But the second that I began to think more positive thoughts, the second that I began to change my perspective about what this actually was that was happening to me, well, then those events started manifesting. Now all of a sudden, astral projection. Now all of a sudden, lucid dreaming, where I'm in places where I can swim underwater, and it's just as real as you and I sitting here talking now. Now all of a sudden, I have orbs out back of my house. I'm laying on my back deck at night, looking up, and the stars flash at me. And then they go off as if the stars are taking my picture. There's one up there that does a figure 8 constantly. And if I really hone in on it with my own consciousness, I can stop it and move it left, right, up. So I know it's absolutely fascinating, but it was only because, it's almost like the biblical definition of whatever, of what faith actually is, the assurance of things hoped for, the belief in things not seen. It's, you have the expression, I want to believe, but it's almost like that won't cut it. You have to say, I do believe. I do believe that what is occurring to me is this. And then it will manifest. Because these entities, whoever they are, they're operating in the unconscious arena of man, right? So a lot of this has to do with if I'm getting too off topic or anything, feel free to stop me and interject. But I really had to do a lot of studying into brain frequencies, gamma, beta, alpha, theta, delta. And because a lot of stuff happens on theta and delta brain waves while we're sleeping. It's as if every night I'm checking in somewhere that I'm unaware of to assess the day's memories that were stored up, So, and there's a lot of spillover that occurs with that as well. I will, as I'm coming into my awake state of mind, there's almost like maybe a 1 or 2 minute period there, and it seems to be prolonging, where whatever is occurring in my sleep state spills over, and I'm aware of it. And I'm talking with people, other entities, about all kinds of various things. Sometimes it's very deep and philosophical in nature, and other times it's just total nonsense that I can't make any sense out of. But in my experience, what has been occurring is that in my unconsciousness, right, at all times, what I'm doing is I am recreating another version of my awake reality, right, as I perceive it. Okay, and that is the arena in which they interact, right? And when something like excessive drug use happens, accumulated guilt and shame, trauma, and it's almost as if that veil to the unconsciousness gets a rift through it, and the stuff that happens in there, it spills forward into the awake conscious arena, and then if it's a nightmare, well, now you're living in a living nightmare. Because that's what it starts to intertwine with your actual reality, But some people enter this with a very open mind and a very good mindset and a contrite being and a contrite heart, and it's a beautiful experience. That wasn't my case. I was addicted to drugs and alcohol, and I was living in a world of guilt and shame and lies and embarrassment and hiding. when I entered into this, and it was painful. It was very, very painful. So, you're given access to the chaos and madness that you're creating for the collective unconsciousness of man in this arena, and essentially you're given the opportunity to clean it up. But it's up to you. Some people just go even crazier. A lot of people I know, they take advantage of it. They're thankful for it. They clean it up. They become more self-aware. They look at themselves in the mirror and they start to wipe off all the film, and then they clean up their self-image, their negative self-image, their pretend self. That was a big problem for me, was my pretend self, this person that, because I hated myself. I absolutely hated myself. I did not like this person that I was portraying to the rest. I didn't like the person that I was inside, so I portrayed this pretend self to the rest of the world. That was all bullshit, but if you could buy it, then I was okay. That was my manner of feeling okay within myself. But it was all a lie. Everything was a complete and total lie. So, wonderful opportunity, but absolutely maddening at the same time. Absolutely maddening and chaotic, Yeah, so...
So the voices and the entities, do you have a kind of identity for them now, or do they identify themselves at all to you? Are they...
So when this first started, human nature, you're going to give them a name, and that's what I did. I gave them. I gave them. There was 2 males and a female, and occasionally when things get really chaotic, there'd be all kinds of voices, young people, older people, but the 3 voices have been the same all the way through. And I named the girl Nikki, the guy Dan, and the other guy Chris, even though they referred to Chris as John. But then I wound up renaming him. I don't know why I did that actually, but it's, so at some point I wound up renaming him, and I'm actually sorry that I did that. That was a mistake on my part, and I should have never done that, because the second, it's almost like that saying, when you label me, you negate me. You put things into a box. Okay, so when I gave them...
Weird. I literally just read that quote about 2 hours ago.
Yeah. So when I gave them names, I began to give them form. And when I gave them form and things weren't going my way, I gave them derogatory words. And then the derogatory words got associated with their names, so that every time I said their name, the derogatory word or statement was attached to it. And then I couldn't get the derogatory word out of my head. And then form took place over the derogatory word. And then that was actually utilized. So that's actually another big part about this, is that a negative occurrence or a negative derogatory term will be imposed on the individual to such an extreme that you find the positive in another area. So for me, drugs and alcohol were my problem. So it's almost as if they created a scenario that was so blown out of proportion with something that didn't actually resonate with me. But then I actually began to question it myself, like, maybe I do have a problem with this. Oh my gosh, and then that became my all-consuming worry, like, oh my gosh, maybe I do have a problem, And the whole time I completely forgot that I was a drug addict and alcoholic. But you don't notice this kind of stuff until months and months and months go by, and then next thing you know, that aspect of it goes away, and then you realize, I completely forgot about the fact that I usually think about drinking 50 times a day. So, yeah.
I have a question. If we can go back to your girlfriend, when she heard the voices and she took the car and went on the slow chase.
Yeah.
Would you say that was like the hitchhiker effect, that she experienced it because you did first, and her association with you created that? And then my follow-up is she still hearing voices in that way, or does she still have those synchronicities like you?
No. So she was able to rebound quickly the moment that she stopped using and stopped living that lifestyle. And I think there's a reason for that, because for the majority of her life, she was a very outstanding individual. Midwife, went to school, just doing great in life. And then at a much, in middle age, in her 30s, fell into doing this. So there wasn't really that much of an accumulation of guilt. There wasn't much for her to actually walk through. It's almost as if, right. Well, I'm sorry, say it again.
Her karmic debts were not as grand. your own.
Exactly. And I believe that a big part of the fear factor with this is that there's something about the methamphetamine and the lack of sleep that it's almost like you're going into an area that they don't want you in that state. And they will scare the shit out of you to get you out. Right? I was very bullheaded, you know, and it was almost as if I was saying to myself, like, I don't want pay-per-view, I want streaming service. And I kept going in, you know, going in. I remember one time the voices went away, and then I had started doing the meth again, and I was up, and then all of a sudden, the one voice that I knew was pretty familiar with at this point said, well, look who's back. And then all hell broke loose after that. They just completely tormented my mind and drove me and her into a rehab where then a hospital, where we both left the hospital. And I wound up walking through Scranton, Pennsylvania, thinking that everybody was after me. You know, because the voices are saying, we put you on Facebook and showed everybody what a piece of shit you are. And and there's like this level of whatever part of your brain is there for good judgment, it just bypasses that. Totally bypasses that, and your level of believability for everything is just completely through the roof. Yeah. And then for a lot of people, and myself included, the moment that you check yourself into a rehab, they go away because they're trying to steer you through fear into a positive direction. Yeah. You know, it's absolutely insane. Yeah.
So do you think they have like intentions of their own, or are they merely serving like you and your consciousness and our consciousness as humans, or are they doing it for their own reasons?
Man, that's a really good question. You know, when you see some of the synchronicities that happen, especially with social media, you know, when you're having a thought, or you put a post up, or you comment on a post, and somebody, it's almost as if the entities are speaking through another person to you. You know, or like certain things just kind of take place and transpire, and you know that it wasn't of your own. Yeah. You know, it's like it's so hard to tell because they can play. To me, they are very amoral. Operating in a society and a structure that relies on morality to get by. So you're dealing with a very non-dualistic entity that's operating with a dualistic mindset, and it's quite a contrast. You know, you really have to get to a point where, I got to a point where I had to realize that as a human being, I am the full embodiment of evil and good simultaneously with an ever-present choice. I'm almost like a baseball bat. You know, so I can use a baseball bat to teach my daughter an American pastime, or I can use it to bludgeon my wife's head in if I want to. It's just a baseball bat. It's my perception towards it and my use of it that will determine its function. So it's once I was able to wrap my head around that, you know, that concept, and to view it as, you know, like that it's almost as if, to go back to your question, I believe that their ultimate agenda is balance. You know, and that there's this constant 51%, 49% going back and forth, negative, positive thing with human beings that they maintain. You know, and with me, it was like I lived the first half of my life very unbalanced. And then this came into it, and now it's like, and I'm telling you, overnight, because, you know, I was living the addicted lifestyle. I was stealing, lying about everything. Like every memory that I had, you know, even in my past, had the wrong emotion attached to it because I was just high all the time. You know, I couldn't decipher anything, and overnight just stopped. I haven't lied. I haven't even told a lie. Like everything just stopped. You know, it was as if my integrity became codependent. And then as time went on, it was as if, you know, now they're throwing the sticks at the dog that belongs back in the wild, you know, with their family, you know. So it's almost, you know, that whole thing. And it's like, I get it. It's all just a big orchestration that, and I'm thankful. I'm very thankful for it. But yeah, balance and stability, I believe, is their, for me anyway, their ultimate agenda, and they'll exact that agenda through any means necessary, even if it includes you banging your head through the wall, you know? Yeah.
That's it.
And what I expressed was gratitude for the experiences that you've had, And would you say that is ultimately like the message you want to give to other people who are listening who might be going through the same kind of thing or know someone who's going through something similar? It's like once you shift from victim to like, no, actually, I'm really grateful for this. I'm thankful. But that's sort of the mind shift that has to happen where you can get to the other side of it and come out better, more whole, realized person.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I remember when we had done the meet and greet, you had said that you had a like a Kundalini experience. So is there any part of that experience that you can relate to the targeted individual experience?
Yeah. Okay. So if I'm going to be honest with you, and I don't know where the term targeted individual comes from. I personally, I find that I have a negative connotation. I teach high school, middle school English. So when you said onomatopoeia, it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But like connotation, where like not the definition, dictionary definition, but the emotional definition, where the word targeted can almost make you feel more victimized.
Right.
I think maybe like chosen individual, or maybe like it was just my turn for rapid evolution.
Okay.
So like my soul, whatever my soul has experienced in the past, it was just my time to get to the next level.
Okay.
I grew up, I played Super Mario Brothers as a kid, and I was really good. And I could like skip all I won a whole one man one time. It's a big deal. And so, but I knew like all the shortcuts, how to get from like the world 4-3 to level 8-1 kind of thing. And so, it's like using a portal. It's like a special little way to get to that next step. And once you know how to jump to the portal, you never have to go through all those boring stages again that can
right
so I don't know, I just like to think of myself as like co-creating my reality with whatever source, universe, God, power that there is, that like together we're saying, oh, this is what I need next. And so that moves me into it's not happening to me. I'm actively participating in it. And I wake up every morning like how is the universe going to delight me today? And I feel like when I move into that, and I can say like right now, I am so delighted by today. Like I have these 2 dogs, but I know they're like brothers. We had this amazing guest on. I've got a cat and a dog. I can take a hot shower anytime I want. Like moving into that was realizing like just how thankful I am, even though there are things that I crave, in me that I don't have yet, but I know that is coming. So if that makes any sense, I think just an optimism that I hear from you, and with you like having your daughter on the way, like personally, I think that you and your wife were being prepared to be your parents. I think there's something probably very special about your little girl that will be revealed to you over time. And it may be even that maybe her spirit was helping you get to that point.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think along those lines as well. And I like what you said, and that is that's kind of a big determining factor in the way that the experience goes, in that with a targeted individual, this happens against them. They're not a willing participant. Whereas with certain things, like when you're doing like certain yoga practices, people are voluntarily bringing this sort of an awakening on themselves, and it's a voluntary commitment that yes, I want to go through this, no matter how painful it is. I want to go through this because I want to be a more enlightened individual. And with this, it's like this is just blasted on you, full force.
For me, like mine was spontaneous. I was not looking for it. I didn't know.
Oh, you were not looking for it.
But yours, Jamie, came out of a place of like stress, abuse,
guilt,
anxiety. So you were trapped in a way anyway, and lying to yourself.
I was in a very unhealthy relationship, and I took a big hike. I stopped for help. I was like, I don't know how to get out of this, but I need help. And 48 hours later, I hadn't left yet. And I was in the bed, and I was so embarrassed, so ashamed. I didn't know, I didn't have anybody to talk to. And all of a sudden, it was like this just energy came up through me, and like all the chakras shook into place, and it was like this whoosh, divine energy, just like my crown chakra opened, and then I got a very clear message from this side about how to get out of it, how to save myself, and they got me out of it. And then I had the near-death experience a couple hours later, and so I wasn't looking for it at all.
Yeah. So the chakra openings are something that I now again, I raised Christian. I had experienced. So let me say, when I was about 20, I want to say I was 22, and this is when I had first started really struggling with drugs and alcohol. And I went into a program. It was called Teen Challenge. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Teen Challenge. So Teen Challenge is a very Pentecostal, like Assemblies of God based Christian program. And it was a year long, and it's all men, and it was very, very strict. So I did 4 months in Syracuse, New York, and then the remaining 8 months I did in Rearsburg, Pennsylvania, at a place they call God's Mountain. But while I was in Syracuse, they had a pastor in there that would do sermons every Wednesday. And he was like this, fire and brimstone pastor that used to wear these like fire ties. And he would literally like have a Bible, and he would attach jumper cables to the Bible and go around and zap guys. Like it was just, it was bonkers. It was off the wall. But I had been there for maybe like 2 months. And I remember one time he put like oil on his hands, and I guess I was, transparent enough in that moment, or willing enough, or had enough faith in that moment to let him put his hands on me and experience what some would call being baptized in the Holy Spirit. Like a full-blown clarity that I had never experienced before, with like a very crystalline type pattern around my entire peripheral vision. And I remember looking at the guy next to me who also had just had it done, and I could tell he experienced the same thing, because he looked at me and he was like, "What is that?" And I was like, "I don't know what that is," So, and now with this occurring, now mind you, my religious beliefs have taken a major shift over the decades, and I actually practice more like Buddhist philosophy these days, just because I was having problems with my mind, and that was like, I needed to become introverted, and Christianity for me was very an extroverted religion. It just wasn't, So now with this occurring, I've experienced all my chakras being opened up. My third eye, my crown chakra. Still daily, my my diaphragm will just start flipping out. If I sit there and I meditate, it'll just start spontaneously like vibrating, to the point where I can grab my girlfriend's hand and put it on there, and it's just pulsating like uncontrollably. And to experience the energies from both of the world religions, I'm left to wonder if all psychosomatic anomalies, or if all spiritual manifestations all come from the same source. But it's our faith and our level of belief towards that allows it to actually manifest. Or if these entities that are operating behind the scene can only operate with an individual according to their belief system. And that seems to kind of go hand in hand with a lot of details that are coming out with the UFO phenomena, that there is a very spiritual aspect to this whole thing.
Wow.
And yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. So
my next question to you. Or
yeah.
Do you want to finish your thought?
No, go ahead.
In your Reddit post, you brought up one of my favorite quotes from Bob Lazar. That we are containers.
Right. So as I was reading that the one night, and I forget what I think I was reading it on the Experiencers community, and it was a big thing about Bob Lazar saying that we're containers. And then the voice, the one that I call Chris, he said we prefer vestibule. And again, I don't know what the hell a vestibule is. So it's like, I gotta go look this up now, right? So it's like, this happens a lot. So then I go and look up a vestibule, and it's like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. You know, it's like when you're going in the Wawa and you open up the first door, but then there's like that little room there.
Yeah.
And before you got to open up the second door and actually go in the Wawa, that's a vestibule. So
in between.
The in-between. The in-between that's able to see both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's like they're there and they are able to view out here through us. And I remember asking one night, like, well, what's the purpose? And he said, we like the ambience. So I said, all right. You know, that was an odd response. So like I said, sometimes it's, I would say 95% of the time, the telepathy that occurs with these entities is very response loop oriented and therapy oriented. It's all a means for me to continue having clarity going backwards, right? So if you can look at Carl Jung's description of the consciousness, right, and what aspects of the consciousness are. So you have your ego, which is your sense of self, according to him. You know, this part of you that that tells the, you know, a guy in my community put it pretty well the other day. He's like, that part of you that tells your hand to put the food in your mouth, like that, you know. So the Buddha refers to ego as simply the sensory organs, that part of us that senses our Maya, our illusion, with our sensory organs. But then there's your personal unconsciousness, which is the stored memories and the associated emotions with those memories that get stored in a human being throughout their lifetime. And then behind all that, through his study of schizophrenics, he had what he referred to as the collective unconsciousness of man. And this is the part of us that, well, what he said was that it was an accumulation of ancestral, you know, family or whatever, that kind of built up in a person's unconsciousness, and that these people were, you know, they were drawing symbols of stuff that were like Celtic symbols that, you know, they should not have known what these symbols were. And he would do research and find out that a part of their ancestry was this, and that, you know, that this happened hundreds of years ago. And, you know, I'm not saying that he's wrong. I'm saying that what I believe is that collective unconsciousness of man is the part of our consciousness that connects us to these entities. And it's and that our active imaginations are interactive imaginations. This is the part that it's like a playground for them. And then when a rift occurs between the layers, well, then that tends to spill up. That comes upward into the ego. So, you know, again, like kind of what I was saying earlier, when that happens, depending on your mindset, it can either be a dream come true or it can be a living nightmare, depending on what you've been doing in your personal unconscious and your collective unconsciousness. So, yeah, but a vestibule or an antechamber is also, that antechamber is my word, but that's also a pretty good description of, you know, of how we're viewed, you know.
Exactly. I always had, my interpretation was like more of like a soul container. But
okay,
in between makes more sense, I think, like that.
Yeah.
And they can interact over here with us, and then they can see through everything pretty much.
Well, I see. That's the thing that I struggle with a lot. I don't, so because if you think about it, we don't actually see. We have eyes, and the eyes that let light in that show our objects that are in our environment, but it's our brain that processes everything. You know what I'm saying? So if that's what they're interacting with, they're not actually interacting with everything that we see. They're interacting with our perception of what we see. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So, and again, it kind of goes back into the onomatopoeia thing. So right now I hear the air conditioner behind me, right? I'm not really paying attention to it, as the whole time that we're talking now for the past hour. I'm not paying attention to the fact that the air conditioner is going, but my brain is. My brain is saying to me, you have an air conditioner that's on behind you and everything is okay. That's a common thing. Well, that's where I hear the voices in that ambient noise. So that is actually what they are interacting with, the recreation of your environment that you're creating for them. And when you live a life where your perception is negative, always, and the way that you view yourself is negative, and the way that you think other people view you, you know, is always negative. Well, that's what they're interacting with. And I've realized that when I think negative, they'll harp on it. They'll exaggerate the hell out of it, right? But when I think positive and I have realistic self-talk and I have mantras that I say to myself, well, you know, what are they going to do? They're either you can't argue with that. You can't argue with realistic self-talk. You know, my rent's paid. I have a good job. I'm a good father. I'm sober. You know, I like all these things, all these accomplishments as time goes on, you know, and I'll actually say to them, what do you got to say about that? They'll say, not a damn thing. And I say, all right. and then it just, you can't give them anything. It's almost as if their purpose again, I can't speak for everybody. Their purpose for me has been to take the negativity of my life and exaggerate it to such an extent that I was either going to cut my head off or I was going to get my life together.
Yeah.
You know, and because I had Lucy, you know, that's my daughter's name, Lucy, and Rebecca, and desperately, and another part was my intention. Like I wanted, you know, I was like a struggling drug addict. Like I wanted to. I didn't want to be like that. I thoroughly hated myself and the life that I was living and what I was offering to society and to my family and the, you know, and the trauma that I was putting everybody through. And I think that was noticed. You know, I think that was really, really noticed. So the more positive of an unconscious arena that I create, that's what they interact with. And then it manifests. It's still spilling forward, you know. Less than a year later, now I'm doing a podcast, you know, about the targeted individual program, which I knew nothing about, you know. And this time last year, I remember getting into such a big blowout with Rebecca. I got out of the car and I had resigned myself to living in a tent underneath of a bridge in St. Louis.
Wow.
I said, this is my new life. This is my new life. And now, less than a year later, I'll have a year sober July 28th. Beautiful apartment in Phoenixville. We just got a new car. I got my little electric scooter I scoot back and forth to work with every day. Great job, benefits that are, you know, dental plan. I'm getting my teeth all fixed. Lucy's happy and healthy. We had a home birth, which was fantastic, right on our bedroom floor. Yeah, I just got to sit there and watch my daughter enter the world. And then we both got into the bed. Like all my relationships with my family and my friends are restored. People that I owed money to because I was not living a very good lifestyle, reaching out to them and making amends where they needed to be made, sharing all these memories with people on Facebook, spending Father's Day with my father, with my daughter, like boom, like just because I was willing to look at myself and go through that agony and look at the unconsciousness, you know, the unconscious nightmare that I was creating for these entities back there, and be willing to face it head on and clean it up. Unless you're very good at hiding your thoughts, which none of us are, you're forced to face them, because the moment that the moment that I became aware that I was being observed and that my thoughts were being observed, because I went through a period where they didn't respond to my thoughts, and then all of a sudden they did, and then all of a sudden I stopped looking for cameras and I said, oh my God, this is happening, and they're responding to my thoughts. Well, then you get scared, because then you start going, what do I have hidden in my closet? And then you're telling yourself, don't think about things. And the second that you tell yourself not to think about something, you've already thought about it. It's too late.
You're thinking about so many different things.
It's too late. So then there's almost like a pull on that sin, on that transgression towards somebody else, on that negative thought that you have towards somebody, on that whatever it is that you don't like about yourself. You know, that, whatever that negative thing is that you perceive to be negative, and you try to move away from it, you have to tackle it. You have to tackle it. You really have to tackle it. And what sucks is that in the beginning, when I was almost 100% certain that this was like the Air Force or the Navy or Space Force or some kind of like, I was unwilling, because I'm dealing with like humans, and then all of a sudden I was like, who cares if I'm dealing with humans? Like, so I went through everything, and I actually wrote it all out in a book. Like, I was that forthcoming with it, and I was that open about it, and I decided to become that transparent with my past life that I wrote it all out in a book, self-published it on Amazon, and put it on Facebook, and I just said, everybody read this shit. Everybody read it. This is me and every grimy thing that I've ever done in my entire life, and it's out there, and I want everybody to read it, because I just need to get over myself. And that was one of the most beneficial things that I could have ever done for myself, because that opened up the door for me to stop hiding. I no longer had anything to hide from anybody. And when you can freely do that, not only do you stop caring what other people think about you, because that was a big problem for me, but then the voices die down because they don't have anything else that they have to dredge up that they can hold against you. Not that they really have anything to hold against you, it's that they want you to face it.
Yeah. And then you already faced it, so there's nothing for them to really bring up.
Yeah, but if you continue, so it's your own level of guilt too. Some people are okay doing certain things, and for them, they won't be harped on because they're okay with doing it. Some people have a very guilty conscience, like myself, and it was very difficult for me to move on from certain beliefs that I had, or certain attitudes that I held towards, people in my past, or my father, or all these things that really needed to be addressed. Yeah, very cleansing.
It sounds like there's a lot of hope, I think. So if anyone's listening and you're going through something similar, that there is hope. There is the bright light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, that your life can turn around dramatically, especially if you really do lean hard into what you're saying. Like you actually that
Right.
Those are the things to bring out. And for me, that's why I wanted to do this podcast. Part of it was I've told my story here, and it was like I was so ashamed really of what I had experienced. I didn't want anybody to know the details of it, and then I just told it all, and then I feel a billion times better because I'm not hiding it, and people were still my friends, and I've made new friends because of it.
Yeah.
So I think it sounds similar to you, and I'm so glad that you came on the show because I hope it inspires other people who are listening who have a story that maybe they want to tell, or they're, like you were saying earlier, that having a face, a name and a face and a story all together, it's very empowering for other people.
Yeah.
People want to share.
Yeah.
Well, it makes people feel like, when you can really get it all out in the open like that, you realize that you're really not that much of a shitbag, and
You're not alone either.
you're not alone. Right, we're all equally shitbags, but we all have a, we have a choice though, we do. We have there's an ever-present moment choice to do the next right thing, and that's our sense of free will. That's where our free will lies at all times. Yeah.
Next right thing.
I find this all amazing because you guys know, Jamie and Josh, why I started this whole thing. And every guest we have pulls me full circle right around where I started, which is everything is connected.
Yeah.
We are all connected, and I actually had a little bit of a realization the other day with like Rastafarian culture, and I really kind of fell in love with I and I. So instead of like you and me, I and I. So I see you as me as well. So like we're one. And then again, like I'm literature I've been reading, books I've reading. Your story, Kevin, is scarily resembles the Law of One by Ra.
Oh, I just started getting into that, so I'm so thankful you brought that up.
39, yeah.
You would not believe. So since I started the Reddit community, PositiveTI, I started getting, and this is just within the past month now, I started getting people from the Law of One community that are now posting in my group that are also targeted individuals, or targeted individuals that are all saying the same exact thing. We went through this same exact thing, and we found great comfort in this, and that's where they found their peace of mind, and managed to actually get the voices to subside and go away. And
Yeah, and I mean, you'll find out as you go through, you pretty much know what's going to happen for most of it already, living your experience.
Yeah, so I'm learning that, and this is a big problem with a lot of TIs, or people that are still stuck in the gang stalking aspect of this, is portentousness. They forecast, they can't see anything good. So they just forecast that everything is going to be bad. And that's what's going to happen. If you wake up every day and you just say, today's going to be another shit day and I expect bad things to happen to me and I expect, it's probably going to happen. And even if it doesn't happen, you're going to find it because that's what you're expecting,
Yeah.
That's what you'll find what you're looking for. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, people that aren't targeted individuals, I have people in my life, it's extremely hard to just be like, hey, it's not so bad. Like, you're just focusing on the worst part of it. And
Right.
if you just look in a different area, you'd be extremely happy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And change your, when you can change your perspective, a lot of it for me was grasping the concept of non-duality. Because the manner in which these entities operate, especially having a Christian upbringing, I'm so used to looking at things in terms of good and bad, evil, bad, angels, demons. So there's this black and white part of my mind that constantly wants to classify them as this or that. And they will operate so nefariously just to get across a good result. If you seek that, it's I refer to it as gifts wrapped in barbed wire, just so you can develop calluses on your fingers. Nepotism laced with sadism. It's this very non-dualistic kind of a thing that, for me being a Christian, I really had to break out of that and go into a non-dualistic thing. So there's a very good statement in Buddhism in Dhyana that says, if you look at Mara, which is Buddha's version of Satan, the representative of Satan. If you look at Mara as the full embodiment of evil, and you look at Buddha as the full embodiment of purity and truth, the only thing that really matters is everything in between, because that's the manifestation for human beings, for our experience. That's, and that's it. So you have these polar extremes of good versus, good, evil, and that whole gray area in between is for our experience. That's for our growth. That's for our enlightenment. That's for us to work out our karma. So we have a point A and a point B, and we have to operate with everything in between. And once I was able to really start looking at it like that, that helped me. That helped me a lot to be able to deal with these entities in the manner in which they work. Because I remember I went this was maybe a little less than a month ago. Everything was really quiet for a week, just the normal stuff. And then I'll have what I refer to as a spillover. Mm-hmm. So when I'm coming up out of my sleep state, oftentimes there's almost like a constructed dream state where I'm being tortured, right? So one of the latest ones was a torture room. It was like something out of the movie Saw. So there was a window with a bed, and then all these weird kind of contraptions up on the wall. And I was catatonic, I couldn't move. I was almost paralyzed. And there was a small being, human form, that kept grabbing things off of the wall and was torturing me with them, and I couldn't do anything about it. And then he went to go pick up something else, and I was able to break free, and I grabbed something off the wall and I jammed it into his chest. And these voices, I hear them in my dreams as well. So I know that they're operating on lower levels of frequencies, brain frequencies, like sleep frequencies. So the one voice, again, the one I referred to as Chris, he said, "That's how you do it, Kemosabe." There was a nickname that they gave me a few months ago, Kemosabe. So they said, that's how you do it, Kemosabe. It sounds very strange, and I just feel awkward saying it, but it's okay. So, and then I woke up. And I felt empowered. You know what I mean? Because usually my dreams, especially when I was addicted, were always me getting into a fight with somebody. I have no pants on and I'm punching them in the face as hard as I can. And it just doesn't faze them. It just, because that was my lack of control and power. I just can't get over this hurdle in my life. And now to have these constructed lucid dreams where I'm being tortured and I'm able to break free from that and take out my enemy, and it's, again, very evil kind of a scenery, but with a good intention behind it. And then, so that happened the one night, and then the next night, I get up for work in the morning around 3:45, and as soon as I woke up, I could tell that I was not in the right state of mind. that there was like an evoked anxiety or fear, like adrenaline was being released, and it wasn't of me. I had no reason for it. Adrenaline's being released, right, and cortisol creating fear in my head. And I said, let me get out of the house before I do something, or before I like scream or something like that, because I used to smash my palm into my forehead, and I'd start screaming, get the F out. That's how torturous it was, like this meshing of the mind, this pulling of the mind. And that was occurring again. And I remember telling myself that this is not part of your environment. This doesn't belong here. And then I got on my scooter on my way to work, and I just kind of like let out a scream, like on the back road along the Schuylkill River. And then it subsided, So that used to happen to me. That used to happen every 4 days. I'd have to go through that. And now it's like, now it's down to like once a month. This, the full release of fear, the full release of these, brain chemicals, and then the more that they do it, and I just overcome. I don't respond to it, which is, it's good. It sucks going through it. And yes, it does come across as torturous and painful, and, but to be able to go through that and not respond, and to become an observer unto yourself and just say, this is fear. This is my human body having a fear emotion, but I don't have to be a part of it. Although it is in me, it is not of me. I really had to get that concept going down. This is in me, but this is not of me. I'm not doing this, and there's nothing in my environment that should be causing this right now, and I don't have to respond. And I haven't had. It's been months since the last time I had some sort of a physical response to it, where I was actually grabbing my head and just that sort of intense thing. Yeah, it's slowly dying down. The voices are residing. The everything. It's just a very it went way up, and now it's going way, now it's slowly going down. It's just a very slow release back into normalcy,
Good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Reminds me of Dune, where Paul Atreides has to put his hand in that box.
Wait, I'm sorry, say it again.
Oh, and Dune.
Oh, Dune. Okay.
Yeah,
Dune. I thought Doom. I was like, what? No.
D-U-N-E, where Paul Atreides has to put his hand in the box. Kevin, do you know this movie? Have you seen
No,
it?
I don't. No.
Watch it. But it's
Okay.
You should read it.
Okay.
Such a better book.
okay.
But anyway, he puts his hand in this box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's all in his mind, and he's the one that determines if what's his hand in the box, if it's being tortured or not, basically.
Okay.
But it's
All right.
a Jedi mind training thing, kind of. Almost.
Yeah. Well, that's, a lot of this is like this. So, this is something I really haven't shared with anybody yet, but, so there's, physical anomalies with this as well that you'll hear from a lot of targeted individuals. So almost like you're being poked with a hot poker on your legs or your feet. A lot of times there'll be a very precision pinpointed itch, like drilling into you like a 1,000 mosquitoes in one needle, and there's no reason for it to be there. A lot of guys will complain. I've experienced this one time where there's the throat will close up. Almost like Darth Vader, like he would do that thing with his throat. Well, that'll close you up. Another night, I was laying in my bed, and I remember the one voice. I don't really hear much from him, Dan. I don't, but I remember the one voice that I referred to as Dan had said, it was almost like a warning, almost like, I'm sorry that we have to show you this. And I was hit with it was like it neutralized me. It was almost like what they would refer to as a direct energy weapon, where I was hit with a blinding white light, and I was completely paralyzed. And that ringing noise that I hear all the time, it went up like a million, just, and it's so bright and it's so loud and it's so paralyzing. You have no choice but to just lay there. You have no choice. You can't think, you can't see, you have no sense of your being or your surrounding or anything. You're just hit with this intense beam of energy, I guess, or whatever it is that's happening here. I don't, who knows? And then it went away. Boom. So I took that as, a means to show me that if their agenda was to have me neutralized, they could do that.
Right.
They could easily do that. They've done it, but they don't. They don't do that. And I didn't take it as fear. I've never feared them. And it was because of my circumstances going into it. I always felt that I was being helped, and I always viewed it as help. So, and even in that moment, I never viewed that as a thing to fear. I always try to find the lesson in whatever it is, and it's always there to be found. And then move on to the next one. And now after a year of going through this, it's slowly going away. But yeah, that was pretty intense. And that's where a lot of people will think that it's the government testing out energy weapons on them, which is understandable. It's extremely, extremely understandable, So here's
like a parent-child relationship almost, where the parent might say, hey, you have to go to bed at 9 o'clock, and then if you don't go to bed, then you get in trouble, kind of thing.
Yeah,
measures sometimes.
I guess so. And what's weird is that at the same time, it's almost as if, because I do have a very rebellious nature still, it's as if I refuse to be forced into doing something that I didn't already want to do for myself and was unable to do because I was an addict. Okay. So, like I still, maybe like I drink too much coffee, or like maybe my diet isn't what I want it to be. And like a suggestion will be made, like, don't eat that. I'll have a rebellious part of me, like, you don't tell me what to eat, and I'll eat it anyway, just to be, because I still have that.
Yeah.
I still had that. Like, there was no part of me that didn't change, that I wasn't desperately seeking to change anyway. And there was no part of me that was ever once coerced into thinking a certain way. The only part of me that was exposed was the part of me that I was unwilling to face. And that's it. A lot of people call it brainwashing. They call it mind control. I was never once, not one time, was I ever made to believe any certain political view, religious view, spiritual view, philosophical view. Now, I will say, though, that anybody that's first entering into this, they start having these signs and symptoms that we're discussing, that it is of the utmost importance that you begin to develop a foundation that's based off of a spiritual and philosophical principle that you resonate with, that you are sincere about, that is, because much will be done for the sake of testing that foundation. I'll say that. So there was a time where, like, before I was like really digging deep into finding who I was just assuming, again, Christian mindset, I'm dealing with demons. So I start, in the name of Jesus in my head, and they're just laughing at me. Like, they don't, it's like, no, like, because that doesn't really resonate with me. So it's like, now, had Christianity truly resonated with me, and I actually believed what I was saying, then quite possibly that would have ended right then and there. But my heart wasn't really in that. I was just trying things because I didn't know what the heck to do, and I was freaking out. How can I get this, out of my head? How can I get this, out of, in those moments? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Well, do you have any other advice for anybody that might be going through this, or anyone that might be going through this?
So I would definitely suggest, don't get yourself stuck in a box, meaning that the experience itself will evolve and revolve around your belief about it. And if you are stuck in thinking that this is an authority figure or it's the government, that will be a direct reflection of your experience. And one of the biggest arguments that I have towards that is that if this is something that the government is experimenting on with their civilians, it would be of the utmost secrecy. It would be. However, people, they'll say, well, here's a patent for it. And there are patents for these technologies to exist. And yet at the same time, if you go and you look up the patent for atomic weaponry, it's labeled as secret by the United States government. You cannot look at that patent. So the United States government does have the ability to take patents and make them secret if they want to. So I've never known our government to hide things in plain sight. It's just not something that they do. I'd never known our government to offer this sort of therapy to just some random civilian, if you choose to look at it as therapy, because it can be, if you choose to look at it like that.
No, and they're also offering like a certain amount of power and self-empowerment. I wouldn't think the government would be interested in that at all.
No, not at all. No. So I'm actually thankful that you brought that up, because I forgot to bring it up before when I was talking about some of the physical manifestations that happen with this. And not to I kind of don't want to ruin the experience for too many people that, go through this and find some things out on their own. But eventually you get to a point where you start to understand that everything that you see, that you touch, that you hear, that you feel, every ailment that you have is nothing more than a concept of the mind. Mm-hmm. And you begin to have so much control over your mind that when they do certain things, I used to get muscle spasms that were directly from them in my left bicep, and it would just be a bop, 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 bop. And then when I could clear my mind out and focus on nothing but that spasm, it would go away.
That's the hand in the box.
Okay.
That's exactly what that is all about.
Yeah, so it's akin to let's say you go into a hoarder's house and you want to help them clear out their home. Mm-hmm. And you go in there and you open up the door and there's just shit everywhere, like everywhere. You look at it, your anxiety goes up, your panic goes up, and you go, where the hell do I even begin? I don't even know where to start cleaning this mess out. But if somebody tells you to clean out their home and you go in and the whole place is empty except for one single chair that's sitting in the middle of the living room, all of your focus is on that chair. You know exactly how to get it done. You know exactly where to go. You grab the chair and you bring it out. And when you're able to break through these layers of the ego and the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious and have all of your focus completely pinpointed towards one thing, mm-hmm. And it's not even that you have to focus on that one thing. It comes from the same area that notions come from, that ideas come from. There's not even a thought associated with it. It's more of an observation to the anomaly, And if we can, so there's a lot of vice versa that happens here with the non-duality. So that if there are entities that have the ability to create certain physical anomalies on a human's body, well, then we have the ability to unmanifest such things when we focus on that as well. Mm-hmm. And it's this give and take, and that's been happening more within like the past month. I've been able to clear out so much of my thought processes, of my thinking, of my because a human being has 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day, and 90% of those thoughts are the same exact thoughts as the day before. This is a study that was done, and Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this in his Rewiring the Brain. Yeah. He's phenomenal. The guy's phenomenal. He's like, yeah, I love listening to him. So we get stuck in a pattern of prior thought, and nothing changes. And when we go to change something, and it doesn't matter if I want to change the time during the day that I want to unload my dishwasher. Well, because you've been stuck in this routine for so long of doing things a certain way, it's almost as if you're having withdrawal from yourself, from your past self. But when you can get rid of those thoughts and get your mind into such a state of present moment mindfulness and meditation, where there's no derogatory thing that can be said to you that phases you. There's nothing that you can think about anybody else that you're going to be feeling guilty about. You start understanding that everything is kind of just a thought, that we're constantly creating an environment in the back of our head with thoughts, with words, with onomatopoeias. These thoughts that we have that are going back there as sounds that are creating environments that these entities are playing with. And then also vice versa, when you start clearing all that out of your inner dialogue and your inner monologue, and everything is quiet and still, you can put your focus on one thing, and then you start realizing that it gets very, very, very deep. You start realizing that everything is just nothing more than a concept. Everything is just really an abstract idea of something. Is really all it is. And the more, so I tend to stay away from reading the work of other philosophers and individuals, unless it's within the targeted individual program, and these are the people that I'm helping, only because I don't want my experience or my beliefs and my perceptions to be shifted through the words of somebody else. I want this experience to be mine. But in the moments where I do stumble across something, and I'm reading Carl Jung, or I'm reading Nietzsche, or I'm reading, now I do read Buddhist scripture, everything that I have learned and everything that I've experienced falls 100% in line. I am constantly confirmed by the words of other individuals that have gone through these similar experiences, before me, that have gone into the unconsciousness of man, that dark arena, and have come through. One of my favorite quotes is by Carl Jung. He said that no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots grow down to hell. So it's that full breadth of the human experience and of our consciousness, and how far deep are we willing to go into the recesses of our unconsciousness, because it's ugly and it's dark. That will determine how far forward we can go with our consciousness into the world and our manifestation.
Totally. Well, I really appreciate everything you just shared with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm sorry I had to do it on my phone. We tried doing it on the laptop, and it just wasn't.
Hey, no, it all worked out.
Fantastic. I think
Thank you.
this is really, really important information for people to know, because I think so many people want to seek out these experiences. But they're extremely difficult to go through. And I'm really glad that you have come out the other side, and seemingly like you seem just like so healthy. You look amazing. Your cheeks are rosy, and you have so much life. I can just tell like you are deeply happy and satisfied with your life.
I am. I very, very much am. Yeah. I couldn't. I'm very blessed. I am. And I'm yeah. Oh, our town's awesome. I do. I love it. This past 2 weekends ago, we went down on the Schuylkill River and just slung up a hammock right on the Schuylkill and dipped Lucy's toes in the water. And
Aww.
Yeah.
I love that. Josh is a new dad also, and so I just love the two of you. And Lee's a dad. I'm a mom. Like, just how beautiful is it? So
Kids.
Yeah.
Mine are all grown up, so they're in their 20s, doing their thing. So like, just savor it, both of you. Like, it just is fleeting,
Yeah.
All these little moments, just like, just drink it up, savor it.
I know I'm cherishing the present moment of it all. I was never ever a present moment individual. I was always thinking about something in my past, which was my main cause of shame and guilt and embarrassment, or I was thinking about something in the future, like how I'm going to handle some event that may or may not even happen, which was my main cause of anxiety and worry. And so I was constantly stuck in the construct of the past or the future, and I was never here. And that's what going through this appropriately and holding the right mindset towards it, that's what that brings. It brings present moment mindfulness, because you are so mindful of every thought. You actually hear, this is something I didn't share, you actually hear yourself communicating with them in the background. Like, I hear my own voice also in the background noise, the ambient noise. It was almost as if at some point a clone version of my own voice was created that had to go through the trauma of my entire childhood and my middle of my life until it finally caught up. And during that whole time, they kept saying, Kevin, you were the same person that you were 30 years ago. You were the same person that you were 25 years ago. You were the same person that you were 15 years ago. You were the same person that you were 10 years ago. And this went on for 2 months. And I could hear myself in the background, almost having like a good cop, bad cop sort of scenario with these other two entities, just beating the hell out of this other version of me. And I could either tune into it and hear what was going on, or I could become it. Because sometimes I would hear my voice getting stuck on repeat it would just start screaming, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. And then I'd have to come in and calm it down. And that's what's bizarre, very, very, very bizarre. So, I mean, if anybody is listening to this and they're like, oh, that guy's crazy, like, please take into account some of the phenomena that has occurred with this that is completely off the scale of anything that would be classified as schizophrenia. Or I'm actually almost under the belief that people that identify as schizophrenia are experiencing the same thing.
Yeah.
They're experiencing the same thing, and they have a very terrible mislabel about them, and it needs to be addressed better. Yeah. In fact, one of the new therapies with schizophrenia is for them to actually start speaking to the voices.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, because it works.
Yeah.
They're usually harping on some sort of negative perception about yourself that they'll continue to harp on until you get over it, or you come to grips. So you come to grips with it about yourself. And there's like a level of perceptual homeostasis that occurs. That you can safely move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you're here and to make this connection with you. And I think that a lot of our listeners are going to really resonate with you. And we definitely want to put up, your socials. And anyway, if anyone's going through something similar, how they can reach out to you or find you on your Reddit page. We wanted to.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So the Reddit page is subreddit PositiveTI, all one thing. And there's another really good one. It's called HVN, which is Hearing Voices Network, which is people that also hear voices, and they have the same exact signs. Most of them have the same exact signs and symptoms of a targeted individual. They just identify differently. So it's which is another thing that targeted individuals need to understand, is that you're not to say that you're not unique or you're not special, but you're not alone in that other people are experiencing the same exact thing. They just give it a different title.
Exactly.
So it's really important to explore these other avenues and talk to other people that have come up with different perception towards it and the outcome that perception has created in their life, because that's ultimately what you want. Don't get stuck. You don't want to get stuck in this box. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
Thank you so much. When you reach a year, contact me. We'll go out for a mocktail.
All right.
There you go.
Sounds good.
You guys live
He's down the block. I can probably
yeah.
yell and he can hear me.
you can go outside your house right now and be like,
All right, great guys. Thank you so much for having me come on and ramble about this and be able to share my message and my experience with this and my strength and my hope. I'll be sure to paste this link on the other outlets that I'm associated with, OTIR and HVN and on Facebook. And it's awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and for having me on as a guest very much. All right, guys. All right. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Oh my God, look at your t-shirt, Project Blue Book. You talked about it. You're like, yeah, of course it's real. It's on my t-shirt.
They wouldn't make t-shirts about it if it wasn't real.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Well, thank you everybody for listening. We appreciate you. If you have
totally
any
forgot we were recording
stories to share, you could email us at ssospodcast@gmail.com. We also have social medias, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, no X. I'm going to say that every single time.
Yeah, no, none of that. No X, no Twitter, none of it.
But UFO Twitter is a really important place.
It is. Their stuff happens, but it all ends up on Reddit. So
Yeah, and I'm fine with getting my info from Reddit. It's fine.
I know. It's just there are a lot of people. There's a whole community there.
There is.
Really on Reddit,
There is. Well, again, thank you everybody for listening. If you have any suggestions for us, again, email us, message us. And if you want to be a guest, same deal. We have a lot of fun stuff coming up. We have a few cool topics we already picked. We have lots more guests. We actually have a lot more guests than I thought we would right off the bat. So get ready for those.
I love it.
Fun. All right, guys.
Thank you for listening. If you'd
Bye.
like to join us as a guest, suggest a topic, or have a story you want us to share, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at ssospodcast@gmail.com. For more behind-the-scenes updates and exclusive insights about SSOS, make sure to follow us on social media. And don't miss out on the fun. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, thank you for listening to the Secret Society of Strangers podcast. This show is an independent production, researched and crafted by our passionate team, but we couldn't do it without all of you. We truly appreciate your support. Embrace the unknown, for not all secrets are meant to be kept. Farewell. Strangers.